What's up YouTube, Capital G here. Today we're going to be talking about one of the original terrors in Yu-Gi-Oh! A card that struck fear in the eyes of all who opposed it, and one that was fit to be used by the king of games, Yugioh himself. Today we'll be discussing none other than the legendary Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. An incredible monster that has taken many forms, embodying various mechanics throughout the years, but none more powerful than this one. In today's story I'll be covering BLS's origins, its downfall in competitive play, and other shocking events relating to the card. With introductions out of the way, welcome to the rise and fall of Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. Chapter 1, Day 1 Destruction. Released early 2004 during the Duel Monsters era in the set Invasion of Chaos, Blackluster Soldier was an immediate force of nature, unlike some of the era's other powerful cards whose potential may not have been realized immediately, like Trap Dust Shoot and Royal Oppression. BLS was universally recognized as one of the top 5 best monsters in the entire game the absolute second the booster set was released. A lot of that had to do with not just the incredible playmaking potential of the card, but the flat out simplicity of it. This wasn't a convoluted reset button of the duel a la Fiber Jar and didn't require specific plays like Yugioh. BLS was a huge multi-purpose battering ram that was laughably easy to summon and was good at every single stage of the game. In the early turns, it could be used as simple spot removal to get rid of any monster your opponent had on the field. Since the soldier could take out monsters regardless of position, this meant it was ideal for getting rid of those annoying but very powerful flip monsters like Magician of Faith, Cyber, and Fiber Jar. BLS also came equipped with a type of removal that was seldomly seen in monsters at the time, banishing. While banishing may be common today, Konami didn't actually implement this mechanic on a widespread level until this very set, where other chaos monsters like Dark Magician of Chaos and Chaos Emperor Dragon also had effects and summoning conditions built around banishing. Because BLS didn't just destroy cards but rather banish them, this meant that cards often put safely on the field with no risk, like Sangan, Witch of the Black Forest, and Sinister Serpent, could now be taken out permanently. And when it came to raw power, BLS was armed with a massive 3000 attack that was nearly unmatched in competitive play outside of its chaos brother, the Big Emperor Dragon. This meant that the soldier's second effect could easily be triggered for an additional attack after destroying a monster in battle, so BLS was pretty much pick your poison. If you had a face down or a floating monster that would replace itself upon death, he would banish it for free, but if you had a decent sized boss monster on the field like Vampire Lord or Jinzo, he would overwhelm it in battle and then probably kill another monster or take a huge swing at your life points. From a utility and power standpoint, BLS was essentially the perfect card with absolutely zero drawbacks, and that was the problem. Chapter 2, Who Dares Challenge Me? The problem with BLS during the DM era was incredibly obvious from the beginning. The card had absolutely zero flaws. It was easier to get on the field than 95% of boss monsters in the game. Its attack and overall stats were nearly unmatched, and it could do massive amounts of game-ending damage by itself with a single battle phase. Combine all of that with its ability to permanently remove any monster in the entire game your opponent has on their side of the field regardless of battle position, and you have a juggernaut on your hands. To make this even worse, this is one of the first monsters in the game that truly exploited turn player ignition priority. This meant, for instance, if you use Bottomless Trap Hole in response to the summon of Blackluster, your opponent would and could invoke their turn player priority to activate its effect to banish your monster anyways. If it hasn't been made clear by now, for those reasons, BLS was considered an absolute staple in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! While the pool of light monsters wasn't quite as good or deep as the Sangan, Jinzo, Witch of the Black Forest, etc. filled Dark Pool, there were still enough solid light monsters in the game like Magician of Faith, Reflect Bounder, and Blade Knights to get the chaos monsters on the board easily enough. Chapter 3, I'm King Now. While BLS was easily one of the best and most overpowered cards in the entire game during its first format of April 2004, it was actually overshadowed by two even more fundamentally broken monsters at the time, and Yugioh and its brother Chaos Emperor Dragon. But with those both getting banned in August, it was time for BLS to rise to the top of the totem pole, and that's exactly what happened. The next core 3 booster sets were incredibly lackluster. Ancient Sanctuary gave us a lot of fairy support, but Enemy Controller was the only card that made an immediate impact on the meta. Next were Soul of the Duelist and Rise of Destiny, both of which were atrocious and only 60 card booster sets rather than the standard 100 at that. Rise of Destiny gave us Dakochi, the Battle Enchanted Locomotive, which was actually useful as the meta had shifted to Chaos Control, using Chaos Sorcerer to fill in for the Emperor Dragon. Chaos Sorcerer was completely unlimited at the time, so it made the transition rather smooth. Considering the next 3 booster sets were basically garbage, there were no new monsters capable of dethroning Blackluster Soldier as the best monster in the game. Chapter 4, Beaten by a Little Goat. With the release of Flaming Eternity in March 2005, we had the DM era's final booster set. Once again, it failed to deliver many viable competitive options. It appeared as if we were heading down another few months of Chaos Control decks ruling the meta, and BLS still being the king of kings, when the meta actually took a wild turn that I don't think anyone predicted. Goat Control, seemingly out of nowhere, rose to the top of popularity and competitive play. The Goat deck strategy worked well against Chaos Control's flip-based strategy, as it relied on Thousand Eyes Restrict to control the game. Thousand Eyes could easily deal with the flip effect monsters by absorbing them before they could be flipped up, and when combined with Tsukuyomi, who gave Thousand Eyes Restrict the ability to use that effect every single turn, plus Nobleman of Crossout, which was a card that was already designed to counter flip monsters, you were going to have a very bad time in this matchup if you were using the old school Chaos Control deck. Being such a powerful card, Blackluster was integrated into Goat Control as it was used in all decks at the time, but during Goat format, it just wasn't able to have the same level of impact. Since nearly every deck in the game was running 3 copies of Scapegoat, it heavily reduced the potential of those huge damage turns that Blackluster Soldier had become known for. After all, how could you push for massive damage if you always had to attack through Goat tokens? The Soldier also became a riskier summon, as even if you were able to banish a monster, it was highly likely that your one and only copy of BLS was going to get absorbed by your opponent's Thousand Eyes Restrict next turn, and even worse, they could creature swap a Goat token in attack mode for it if it was your only monster on the field. For these reasons, BLS was seen as a great card, but it was actually more of an afterthought during this format. Chapter 5, and now I rest. As we all know with Konami, they don't like for one deck to dominate a format so heavily, so many expected them to hit the Goat Control deck, which they actually did, with limits to Tsukuyomi, Metamorphosis, Thousand Eyes Restrict, and Scapegoat on the April 2005 ban list. In somewhat of a shocking turn of events, they also outright banned Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, on the same list. I say somewhat because unlike Tribe Infecting Virus, which was known to clear an entire board of goats with a simple Sinister Serpent discard, Sinister Serpent was also banned on this very list. Blackluster Soldier was essentially an afterthought during Goat format, a fantastic card, but in no way format defining. Blackluster would spend the next 6 years on the Forbidden list, missing the entire GX and 5Ds eras, and wouldn't actually return until the beginning of Zexal with its first booster set, Generation Force. Chapter 6, I Still Got It. For BLS, returning to the game 2 hours later was definitely an adjustment. A card that could have been insane at the end of GX when Konami released Dark and Light booster sets back to back and Phantom Darkness and Light of Destruction, BLS was now entering a world that was ruled by Xyz monsters, or was about to be ruled by those. Luckily, BLS was still fundamentally an amazing card on paper, and with the advent of hand traps during the 5Ds era, it meant many decks, regardless of their attribute composition, could run copies of Effect Veiler for the light fuel needed to summon the Soldier. Because of this, it was actually quite common to see Blackluster splashed into Dino Rabbit and Insectors. For Dino Rabbit, it was as simple as 3 Torghad from the Underworld and a Sangan, and obviously Veilers for light, while Insectors were already dark attributes, so you really didn't have to do much there. At the beginning of Zexal, the TCG still had priority, and the most commonly played Xyz monsters in the game were nowhere near as strong as the Soldier's 3000 attack, making it a pretty great asset for meta decks 7 years after its initial release. The real show would come 6 months later, however, with the creation of 2012's Chaos Dragons, a deck that was absolutely suited for BLS in every way. It was fast, chaos themed like its DM decks of the past, and most importantly, it was aggressive as hell. In a deck full of powerful boss monsters like Dark Arm, Gores, and Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, BLS fit in perfectly and aligned with what the deck wanted to do. Chaos Dragons with BLS would actually go on to win a YCS championship in France, get second place at at 2 other YCS events and actually get countless of other premier tops during that format. Chapter 7, not quite time for retirement. After spending over half a decade forbidden, Blackluster Soldier is now completely unlimited in both the TCG and OCG formats, although it doesn't actually see any competitive play currently. That's mainly due to circumstance and not the card itself. BLS has oddly not been power creeped almost 15 years after its initial release. The card is still absolutely phenomenal, and it's mainly not seeing meta play because Konami has focused a lot less on the dark and light chaos attributes as of late. However, in my personal opinion, I think that all it's going to take is one great chaos archetype in the future, and I guarantee you this card will absolutely be meta again. So let me know what you guys thought of the story. BLS has kind of an interesting history because it was a card that when it first came out, it was so magnificent and really didn't have any flaws in its game, but it was kind of overshadowed by its brother and by Yatagarasu. And when it finally kind of was the big fish in the tank, it definitely took over the game. But then Go format just randomly slowed the card down, and it just oddly enough ended up getting banned. So yeah, very strange history as it stayed banned for over half a decade, and then it came back, and now the card's actually unlimited and sees no play despite the fact that it's just as good now. Very, very interesting history in this card. Whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.